What's up, everybody, and welcome back to Fireside Giants. I'm your host, Anthony Rivardo, joined by my co-host, Alex Wilson. And today we want to talk about a couple of veteran quarterbacks that could be on the move via trade for the New York Giants to consider in today's episode. And I want to preface this by saying, keep an open mind. You might hear us mention one of these quarterbacks being Derek Carr, and you might immediately jump to the comment section and say, what are you guys thinking? Let us explain ourselves first before you jump at our throats, because there is a line of thinking here for Derek Carr to the New York Giants on a very cost-effective deal. His contract can easily be maneuvered and managed to make the money affordable, plus whatever the Giants would be trading would be very low cost, and he unequivocally would be an upgrade over Tommy DeVito or whoever the New York Giants had last year. So just keep an open mind as we go through this discussion. We're going to talk about Derek Carr. We're also going to talk about Matthew Stafford. A lot of Giants fans are buzzing about Stafford right now. If you guys didn't see it, the New York Giants did hire an assistant quarterbacks coach over the weekend who happens to be the brother-in-law of Stafford. So now there's some connecting of the dots here, leading Giants fans to think that they could be positioning themselves to acquire Stafford. Built into that conversation is the fact that Malik Neighbors has been tweeting about his desire for the Giants to trade for Stafford. So all of this we will discuss again open-mindedly. We will just have a clear conversation about why we think it could work, why we think it couldn't work for both of these quarterbacks, and we're going to go ahead and dive into that immediately. I think we're going to go ahead and start with Derek Carr, though. Alex, how are you doing today, my friend? What are your thoughts? And I know that there are some details that you think you figured out about Derek Carr's contract. Again, the contract is very hard to understand. There are so many moving parts, and the NFL salary cap, well, it's just very difficult to understand. That's just putting it plainly. And so we tried to figure out as best as we could what the money would look like for the Giants if they inherited Derek Carr's contract, and we'll go over those details and then speak more generally about why we think he would or wouldn't be a good acquisition for the Giants. But Alex, before you dive into those contract details, how are you doing today, my friend?
I'm doing pretty good, man. And I want to preface by saying normally the contracts aren't that difficult. It's just the Saints do ridiculous things with them. So now we're like, what the hell? Like, you look at the Saints and what they're doing with these contracts, the void years, the backloaded contract. It's just a freaking hellhole to go down. So, if you're the Giants and you want Derek Carr, the problem in this instance is in that the Saints aren't willing to deal Derek Carr, because I'm sure they are. They want to get rid of as much contract as possible. The problem is they're $77 million in the hole right now. They have to claw and etch their way out of what is mayhem in terms of what they have available this upcoming year. I mean, they have, negative $54 million in cap space. They have to cut, restructure, void beyond their wildest dreams just to get out of this situation. It's going to take 4 years just for them to get out of this financial hellhole. And the thing about Derek Carr is, I want to list the problems with this contract, right? One, he has a full no trade clause. So if he doesn't want to go to the Giants, he will not be going to the Giants. If he wants to go play for a team that he knows he's going to be the starter, he's going to be the guy, it's not going to be the Giants, most likely, because they want to draft a quarterback, and they're going to have bringing in a guy like Derek Carr with the intention of, you're probably going to be a bridge. That's what they'd be telling Derek. We're going to draft a quarterback this year. You're probably going to be a bridge. Are you okay with that? If I was Derek Carr, I mean, listen, I think he's an okay, decent player, but he's not a high-profile starter. And, anymore. I'd even say at maybe 1-2 years of his career, he was up there, but he is not there anymore. He did not look good for the Saints this past season. And he got injured at the end of the year too. So, he was good, not great. I'm going to label him like a tier 3 quarterback, maybe like an average level quarterback. I'll let you get your take on that, but more so the contract here is really, I'm going to give it my best shot, guys, because I have to be honest, it is looking at freaking gibberish. It makes no sense. He has a $51.5 million cap hit in 2025, $61.5 in 2026. Now, the Giants would not be taking on all of that cap hit. He only has $10 million in guarantees left on his deal. The Saints have to pay him a $10 million roster bonus in March of 2025. So he will not be traded before then, because another team would have to basically say, yeah, we'll take that money, that dead money, and we'll take the cap hit. In fact, Anthony, now the more that I'm thinking about it, if I was the Giants, just to take on Derek Carr's contract, I may demand that the Saints give us one of their young players, young, decent players. I'd be like, maybe an instance is we'll take that contract from you, but you got to give us someone of value, because Derek Carr's not worth what he's being paid unless they take on a massive amount of money, which, yeah, is reasonable to think of. But maybe they could acquire Derek Carr and another young piece that's cost controlled to help offset some of the other problems we have on this roster. Now, obviously, the Saints, I mean, they got problems of their own. But looking at just the players that, at first glance, Ryan Ramczyk, like, I mean, Cesar Ruiz, like there are some guys that are valuable. Of course, like they have Alvin Kamara, but we're not going to probably get him. Chris Olave is interesting. I know he's had some concussion problems, but maybe you could try to get Chris Olave and pair him with Malik Neighbors. That's something that I don't think they're going to do that, obviously, because he's one of their core young pieces, but
I
it's
think
interesting.
more likely is that the Saints would add a draft pick on in order for the New York Giants to take on.
That's
second.
also
So think
fair.
Brock Osweiler. Remember when
Right.
Brock Osweiler was traded? He got that ridiculous contract that never made sense for Brock
Yeah.
Osweiler's talent, and I think he was traded to the Texans, if I'm not mistaken, and it was basically to the Texans so that the Texans would take on his contract and get a draft pick for taking on that contract. The Giants could potentially trade for Derek Carr and gain a draft pick just for taking on his contract is one of the incentives for the Giants to consider this. However, as you mentioned, I think there's about $40 million left for either the Saints or another team to pay to Derek Carr in guaranteed money, meaning that the Giants could pay him, if they wanted, all of that $40 million this season and then cut him after the following year in 2026. They have the cap space to do that. Or they could spread that money across 2 years, make it $20 million in 2025, $20 million in 2026, or hell, add some void years on. Make it a 3-year payment schedule where you're giving him some money now, some money in 2026, and some money in 2027. The Giants can basically, if they acquire this Derek Carr contract, spread out the money as long as they want and keep the cap hits as low as necessary. Mm-hmm. The thing here is that this contract is affordable. It's just about how the Giants want to pay it out. If they traded for it, it would just be about how they pay it out. But they could pay it out, especially if you guys saw the last episode that I did here, breaking down the salary cap. After 2027, the Giants don't have any long-term contracts signed outside of Dexter Lawrence, Andrew Thomas, and I believe it's Brian Burns. Those are the only 3 long-term contracts that the Giants have going past the 2026 season. The rest are currently players on rookie deals. And if you look at the Giants' recent draft classes, they don't have a lot of extensions to hand out after these rookie deals expire. So the Giants have basically all the money that they want to spend for the future seasons. 2025 and 6, they've got a few contracts on the books. Outside of that, they can pretty much do whatever they want and sign anybody to long-term deals or inherit a Carr contract and spread the money out. But I want to make the argument for Derek Carr. I know we're kind of arguing back and forth here, Alex, kind of like, well, the contract is tough. You can't really determine how much there is that the Giants have to spend. They can move the money around. It's not easy, but there is financial incentive and draft pick incentive potentially for the Giants. What I do know is this. If the Giants were to trade a draft pick to the Saints, it would be a low-cost pick because of the contract. The Giants, I think, would probably be giving up a 3rd or 4th round pick to get Derek Carr at the most.
I think
I don't know.
I think that
Maybe
they're
even
basically just giving something in return just to get him. Like just because there has to be something in exchange. Okay, so after looking at the contract, I'm starting to understand exactly what the Giants will be taking on here. So, okay, the Saints, if they trade Derek Carr, and this is where I start to get turned off, by the way. If the Saints trade Derek Carr, they have $41 million in cap space they have to eat over the final 2 years of that deal. Now the void years are already built in. They have to pay those void years. Like that, those aren't going away. They're accounted for $41 million though of the final 2 years of that deal. Now, Derek Carr, guys, bear with me, has a $51 million cap hit next season and a $61 million cap hit the following season. The Saints would only be responsible for $41 million of that amount. So 61 plus 51, you're getting to 112. So 112 minus 41. That's where you're gonna find out the actual number. So it's $71 million. It's really around $72 million that the Giants would be inheriting. $72 million the Giants would be inheriting over 2 years. So you could restructure that. You could spread it out. You could extend him. But you're going to be on the hook for $72 million. Now, the question is, and I actually think if I'm the Giants, I'm like, we'll take Derek Carr. We'll give you a 7th round pick, but you also have to kick in like a valuable draft pick for us. Like I'm actually talking about like a 2nd, 3rd round pick for just to take Derek Carr, because the Saints are in such hell right now with their salary space. They're actually against the wall. Their backs are against the wall. They have no choice. So I actually think if I was the Giants, I'd be like, I'd be pressuring them and be like, we'll take Derek Carr's contract, but you got to give us your second round pick to do it, because they have to get rid of him, either cutting him or trading him. There's no keeping Derek Carr, but he also has to improve the trade clause. Let's assume he accepts a trade to the Giants. In this instance, you'd be taking on $72 million for 2 years. You could build a void year into the third season. You could spread that $72 million over 3 years. It's a much more affordable deal in that instance. You have 2 years of good veteran bridge quality play, and you would still draft a quarterback this year, or maybe you don't want to go BPA, and then you get one next year. Who knows? I think you still probably draft one this year personally, but that's kind of how I feel. So that way you have an insurance policy, and it makes sense, but I'm only considering this if I'm getting a really valuable draft pick from the Saints.
I think there's a couple things to keep in mind here. First of all, just to clarify, we're only bringing up Derek Carr because not Ian Rappaport, Jordan Rannon back in January mentioned Derek Carr as somebody that the Giants have their eye on. They've already actually been linked to Derek Carr. That's the only reason we're bringing him up. So I wanted to make sure that I brought that point into this and clarify. That's why Derek Carr's name is part of this conversation. The other thing you said, Alex, about the Giants needing to inherit a high draft pick, while I think your line of thinking is sound there, I think you also have to kind of remember Derek Carr is a massive upgrade for the New York Giants. So the Saints might say, we're already giving you an upgrade. Why would we give you a valuable draft pick just to take on this big upgrade at quarterback? And before anybody gets crazy here, if you don't think that Derek Carr is a massive upgrade at quarterback for the Giants, you are kidding yourselves about how bad the Giants quarterback room was this past season. Derek Carr played in 10 games this past season. He had a 15-5 touchdown to interception ratio. The New York Giants quarterbacks, all 4 of them combined, had a 15-13 touchdown to interception ratio across 17 games. 15-13 across 17 compared to 15-5 across 10. Unequivocally, Derek Carr is a major upgrade for the New York Giants at quarterback. He also did that in front of one of the worst offensive lines in the NFL. The New Orleans Saints offensive line was absolute trash this past season. This is not me saying that Derek Carr is a Pro Bowl quality talent. This is not me saying that he is a long-term solution for the New York Giants. I am not trading for Derek Carr if I feel like he prevents me from drafting a quarterback. That's why I'm mentioning this in the first place, because I don't think he prevents the Giants from drafting a quarterback at all. You could absolutely trade for Derek Carr and still take Shedeur Sanders or Cam Ward with a top 3 draft pick. Absolutely, that would be the strategy here. You are bringing in Derek Carr because the New York Giants desperately need to return to a status of relevancy. They're not only trying to get better, they're trying to get relevant. They're that bad. They went 3-14, had a 10-game losing streak. They've been the worst team in the NFL for the last 2 seasons when you combine their record. The New York Giants need a season where they win at least 6 games. And maybe it's no more than 6, but they need to at least be competitive in some of these games. They're competing in arguably the best division in football now, with the Washington Commanders and Philadelphia Eagles being juggernauts. The Dallas Cowboys are still a better team than the New York Giants. The Giants have sunk into the bottom floor of the NFC, and they desperately need to claw their way out. They had the worst record out of any NFC teams. The only 2 teams ahead of the Giants in the draft order are both AFC teams. They are the worst football team in their conference. They have to at least get average again before they can be good. You don't go overnight like the Washington Commanders did very often. You don't go from worst to first. You oftentimes have to go from worst to average to, okay, now let's compete. Derek Carr brings you to that average point. He's been an average quarterback for above average. He's still an above average quarterback. He is not a Pro Bowler. He is not a top 10 quarterback in the NFL. But again, he makes the New York Giants return from 31st in the NFL to hopefully 17th. And that is a night and day monumental difference. So trading for Carr, if he can get you to that 17th ranked offense, you likely want to inherit that contract plus a draft pick to get back to that league average to slightly above. Again, 15-5 TD to INT ratio across 10 games versus 15-13 ratio across 17 games. It is a night and day upgrade for the New York Giants over what they had last year. Plus, trading for Derek Carr doesn't stop you from drafting Cam Ward. So you could walk into 2025 with Derek Carr as your major immediate upgrade at quarterback and Cam Ward as your long-term potential franchise quarterback. You can win a decent amount of games in 2026 without having to worry about tanking for a quarterback. You can win some games, you can get back to relevancy, and you can move on from Derek Carr in 2026 and hand the keys over to Cam Ward after a year of development. And hopefully you have a situation where you've got a young quarterback who took a year to develop and now steps in as a starter and is immediately a superstar. That is the line of thinking here for Derek Carr and a potential trade for the New York Giants. Again, the money is a little bit difficult to understand. The Giants would have to get creative in the way that they spread the money out in order to make sure they can upgrade the rest of their roster. But just on this line of thinking, the contract is affordable. The contract doesn't prevent the Giants from upgrading their roster. And the player upgrades the New York Giants significantly. Those three boxes checked. Now, the fourth box being, does he prevent you from drafting a quarterback? No. So you can knock out all of those things. You can still have a decent salary cap situation. You can get extra draft capital. You could get a starting quarterback, a legitimate starting quarterback, and you could get a long-term franchise quarterback. Plus, you could still upgrade your roster throughout the rest of the offseason with the cap space that you still have available to you. Derek Carr does make sense for the New York Giants. That's why Jordan Rannon threw his name out there in that article last month. It wasn't one that I understood at the time, but after doing deeper research, it now does make sense. The Giants can upgrade their team. The Giants can be at least average on offense with Derek Carr. And the Giants can still get a franchise quarterback even if they acquire Derek Carr. So all of those boxes are checked. That's why I think he does make sense. That's why I wanted everybody to keep an open mind for the first half of this episode. We just had a 15-minute discussion. Hopefully you listened through it and didn't draw your conclusions too soon. Because again, if you take this line of thinking and you look at the money and you look at how bad the Giants were last year and how, honestly, Alex, decent Derek Carr was last year, 15-5 TDINT across 10 games, that is monumental compared to the Giants. So, Alex, looking at it from everything that I just mentioned here with these football reasons for acquiring Derek Carr, are there any football reasons that you think the Giants shouldn't acquire Derek Carr? Are there anything that moves against Derek Carr in a potential acquisition here? Outside of just the money, is there any reason that you would see Derek Carr as not being a big enough upgrade for the Giants to consider?
I mean, he'd be the best quarterback we've had in a long time, objectively. So I don't necessarily think there's a problem with him as a football player. My only concern is that over the next 3 seasons, we've seen. Okay, so here's how I would lay it out: is that I think Cam Ward, his ascension as a rookie, he needs time. Sophomore season, I can see him taking a big step forward. Let's say in this instance we land Cam Ward. He takes a big step forward as a sophomore. But you want to build around him. You want to add pieces around him. You still have this contract. You still have this money on the books. You still have to be a little bit careful. Like, you could push money. You could backload contracts, but then you might get into a sticky situation if they don't pan out. I would prefer to front load contracts. You won't be able to front load as much money as you'd want with a player like Carr on the team and him accounting for $30 million in cap space. So I do think that there are some financial limitations to Derek Carr, where I would prefer to maybe go out and get like a Jameis Winston for a year on a 1-year guaranteed deal and then move on. Or I would maybe go even I'd rather maybe a Kirk Cousins, acquire him for next to nothing from the Falcons. I know he's not as good and he's kind of washed now, but the truth is, like, I'm not. My priority right now is making sure a rookie is in a good spot to take over and having a tremendous amount of financial flexibility to build around them. Derek Carr does complicate that a bit, and so does Matthew Stafford, by the way. So those are the two things that it does turn me off a bit, is that it does impact you financially. However, Derek Carr is better than most of the free agents available. And, I do believe that Stafford is by far better than all the free agents available. So, the problem is the Giants are looking to find a bridge, not get a long-term starter via the trade market. And that's why I kind of run into a problem, is like, I think that if it was less money, sure. If the Giants walked away with a second-round pick, though, from the Saints, now we're talking about something different. Now we're talking about value and a plug-and-play starter, where I think there has to be some situations here where the Giants walk away with a lot more than just Derek Carr to take on that much money. That's kind of how I see it. And if we're giving up anything to get him, it's a 7th-round pick. Like, we're giving up the bare minimum to acquire Derek Carr because he's not that valuable. He's just objectively not worth that much money.
He is a major upgrade for the New York Giants, I think. So I do think there's a world where they give something up for Derek Carr. If you're giving up a mid-round draft pick to take your quarterback room from 32nd in the NFL to now 17th in the NFL, 16th in the NFL, you have to sacrifice something in order to make that big of an upgrade. No, you're not going to make yourself a Super Bowl contender overnight with Derek Carr, and you're not going to have a top 10 quarterback room in the NFL. But if you're in the upper half to around the halfway point of the league, it's worth sacrificing something for, in my opinion. I think what we need to keep in mind here, Alex, the free agent market of quarterbacks. Let's name these top guys that we've discussed. Sam Darnold and Derek Carr. Sam Darnold's had one good season. Derek Carr has been a decent starter for over a decade now. You could say that they're arguably the same caliber of players. So if you're paying up for Sam Darnold, if you were one of those Giants fans that said go out into free agency and spend big on Darnold, why don't you spend at least a little bit on Derek Carr? I don't know. Justin Fields, Derek Carr is a better player right now. Jameis Winston, Derek Carr is a better player right now. So he is an immediate upgrade for a Giants team that has an owner who said he has to be happier in 2026 than he was at the end of the 2024-25 season. The Giants have to win games in 2026. 25, Derek Carr does help you do that. He is a huge upgraded quarterback, and he doesn't prevent you from drafting one long term. So I think there are many reasons to make the argument for Derek Carr. And when you compare him to the rest of the quarterbacks on the trade market, he is the most realistic option because, Alex, let's move into the Matt Stafford discussion. Stafford is not a realistic target, in my opinion. I know that there's been a lot of dot connecting here for the Giants and Stafford. The brother-in-law thing is interesting. I get it. Matthew Stafford is at the tail end of his career. He won a Super Bowl and Super Bowl MVP with the Los Angeles Rams. I cannot understand why he would be incentivized to leave a juggernaut team that almost beat this Eagles Super Bowl winning team in the playoffs. Why would he leave that situation and go to the New York Giants, who are rebuilding and drafting his replacement the second they acquire him? And they'd have to give up a future first-round pick probably to acquire Matt Stafford. To me, it doesn't make sense for either party involved. Absolutely, Stafford turns you into a good football team overnight. He's better than Derek Carr for sure, but his contract is a very lucrative one. You'd have to pay a lot of money, and you'd have to pay premium draft capital to acquire Stafford. Plus, you'd have to convince Stafford that retirement is less of an attractive option than playing for the New York Giants. And I don't know if you can convince him that, because honestly, as a Super Bowl champion quarterback, you might prefer to retire than go out there and get beat to shit behind the New York Giants offensive line for a year. That's just the way it is. So I don't think Derek Carr is a realistic option for the Giants, Alex. If you have any differing opinions, I'm curious to hear them. But for me personally, I just don't see a world where Stafford would willingly go to the New York Giants.
Yeah, I mean, he wants to stay in LA. And if you think Stafford at 37 is going to walk onto the Giants and make us contender, I have news for you, buddy. The Giants and the Rams are vastly different. The rosters are different. The coaching is substantially different, right? Stafford at 37 walking into the Giants. And by the way, go look up how much better Stafford is in a dome compared to in MetLife in the rain and the freaking horrible wind. Like, he's played in a dome his whole career. You want to go test what Matthew Stafford looks like in bad weather? Go look at what he just did in the most recent game. He couldn't freaking hit a receiver. Like, I don't want to be the freaking guinea pig for a player who's played in his dome his whole life. So like that's kind of where, I mean, it's not like the biggest variable in the equation, but Sean McVay's not going to trade Matthew Stafford to the Giants out of respect for Matthew Stafford. Like, let's be honest. Stafford doesn't want to go to New York and finish his career in a dumpster team. He's going to want to go to a team like the Vikings where he can go and compete immediately. You know what I mean? Like, that might be a more of an interesting situation for him than anything else. But the question is, like, the Giants could sign, for the amount they're going to end up paying a player like Derek Carr via trade, they could just go sign Sam Darnold for a 2-year, $60 million deal and have the same exact effect. You know what I mean? Like, and just be able to move on and not have any other money added on to it. They could go sign Justin Fields to a 2-year, $40 million deal and probably get similar value. You know what I mean? I don't feel as though either of these trade targets are in the best interest of the Giants. Now, I know Field Yates did say that this morning in his mock draft that the Giants could look into getting a veteran quarterback. I don't know how real that is. I'm sure they'll kick the tires, but it would have to be a hell of a favorable deal. The Saints have their backs against the wall, so I could see why it would make sense for us. But at the same time, it definitely would be a risk, and I don't necessarily think it's a one that I'm willing to double down on and take. I think you just go into free agency, you get a bridge with the intention of moving on from that bridge after a year, and that is it. And then you get a competent backup quarterback to your young rookie who's on a rookie contract, and you don't add any more financial limitations to your future. There's just no reason to. You know what I mean? I know you want to enhance and improve the quality of quarterback, but the goal here is to develop a rookie, not to have Derek Carr start for 2 seasons. So I think getting a 1-year guy like a Winston, even a Kirk would be fine, just to be a guy to model after, just a guy to follow, a guy to you just be competent until that rookie is ready. I think that's my priority. That's just my personal opinion because I think the financial benefits of it are substantial.
I get that, but for me, from a football winning standpoint, Derek Carr, out of all of the options for the New York Giants that are realistic, let me clarify, probably gives you the best chance to win football games. And the Giants have to do that in 2025. So if they have to sacrifice a little bit of money to win some games this year while the rookie gets ready, I don't think that Derek Carr prevents you from putting the rookie in by week 10 to 15 anyway. Same way that Giants had Eli Manning and Kurt Warner. When Kurt Warner was playing well and the Giants were in the playoff hunt, they pulled him from the lineup anyway and went with Eli Manning. He took over as the starter. The Giants can absolutely do that with a Cam Ward, a Shedeur Sanders, and Derek Carr pairing, in my opinion. So I don't think Carr prevents you from doing anything that you want to do. And if that's the case, and he's strictly just an upgrade at quarterback, that's what the Giants need, an upgraded quarterback. And he is a realistic option that the Giants do need to consider, even though he's not the most attractive high ceiling option. So that's just my opinion and take on it. I know there's going to be a lot of differing opinions. That's fine. This will be an open conversation that we continue to have through the offseason. If we hear that the Giants are negotiating for Carr, we will give our updated take by the time that rolls around and occurs. Because, hey, maybe by the time we get to March, I think this is a terrible idea. I could totally change my mind. But right now, I think that he is one of the most realistic options for the Giants, and he at least makes them probably a 6-win team, which is a monumental upgrade over 3 wins this past season. And I don't want to just win 6 games. I want to win 10 games. I want to win 15. I get that, and I know that's how a lot of you guys feel, because I feel that way too. But Derek Carr at least gets us closer to average while the rookie prepares to take us to that next stratosphere. And for a Giants team with Brian Dable and with Joe Shane desperate to win games in 2025, I really do think there is a realistic argument that you can make for trading for Carr on an effective deal that you could spread the money out for. You can keep your flexibility financially and maybe even inherit a draft pick on the way. So I think there is a lot to consider here, especially if you're talking about building through this free agency process, which is going to be a tough one for the Giants with a very thin market at the quarterback position. So again, if you're comparing Carr to a Fields or a Winston, it's not even close who the best quarterback of those 3 is right now on the market. So I think there is an argument for it. Again, I know a lot of you might disagree. We'll continue to have these conversations in the chat and throughout our next episodes. But that's pretty much going to wrap this one up. Make sure to leave a like if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, ring the bell, and make sure you go ahead and follow us on all of our social media channels at Fireside Giants. Without further ado, we'll catch you on the next one. Have a good one, and let's go Giants.